All right, welcome everybody. I'm Mark. This is Tara. We recently purchased Vintage Cellars from Gene. That's who owned it for a long time and did an awesome job. And we're newbies into the beer world for the most part. We also own Fifth and Wine downtown, which is a restaurant and a wine store, and we sell a little bit of beer. Now that we have Vintage, we feel like we need to jump in a little bit more and learn about beer. And Tara decided to buy it, and she made me sign the papers. Which it's only bank money, no big deal. Or maybe some government money these days. Anyway, so we're happy to own it, and we hired Jeff Carroll came along. Oh, that's nice, Neil. We both have beers too. You can't talk about beer if you don't have a beer. Right? Anyway, we hired Jeff Carroll to help us up there, and Dennis stayed on. Has been at Vintage for a long time, so and then Gene Vick is helping us a little bit up there too. So we're really trying to learn the place, and we're not changing a thing. Everybody relax. We're gonna keep everything like it was and try to do some additional things. So, and the additional thing is this beer club, and we've been wanting to do this down at Fifth and Wine, but we didn't think people would join a beer club at Fifth and Wine very quickly. So it's much better to have it up there. So some of the things you guys get from the beer club is you obviously you get beer every month. That's a big key to it. But you also get 5% off any purchase you get at Vintage Cellars. So if you just come in, just tell them you're in the beer club, you automatically get 5% off. You also get that downtown at our Fifth and Wine store on the retail side, 5% off there. We're also going to start doing some beer tastings. We have a full catering license downtown, so we can start doing some beer tastings. And you would either get free or depending on how expensive the beer is, discounted admission into those beer tastings. And then we often find some special one-offs. Maybe we get a 24 or something of a special beer. And so you guys will have first access to those. And we'll send out an email to you guys offering them first use. And we'll be coming up with more perks for it too. I think it'll be really fun. We're excited, really excited about this new beer club. And we're really excited to have Neil from Cigar City Brewing with us. He's our first brewer, so that's kind of fun. And you guys are our first members. We just looked when we bought Vintage Cellars. We looked at the very first members of the wine club there. And I think it was what 2002 or something. 2002. So you guys, what was that? 20 of us? 25 new members. So you guys will be the original beer club members. So maybe once a year we'll do a party for the original beer club. Anyway, Neil, thanks for joining us. Are you in Tampa, I assume?
Yep, I'm coming to you live from the tap room here at Cigar City Brewing in sunny Tampa, Florida. It's a chilly 93 degrees out this afternoon and nice and humid. So, living the Florida summer life right now.
Nice. So can you tell us a little about yourself and how you got in the beer industry and then maybe how you ended up at Cigar City?
Sure, absolutely. So I've been involved in beer in a professional capacity for a little over 10 years now. And I came in through the retail end. I came in originally as a bartender and then as a bar manager and running beer programs around a few places. I'm originally from New York. So I was working at some beer bars in New York, moved down to Georgia. I was there for a number of years. And then the opportunity presented itself about 6 years ago with Cigar City to come over and help run the tap room down here. So I did that for about a year and a half. And then that sort of coincided with Cigar City growing out of, at the time, this is back in 2014, 98% of our beer was sold in the state of Florida. And as we started to grow and as we began to open up new markets and get out to the West Coast and get out to places like Montana, Joey Redner, who's our founder and CEO, said, hey, I want you to get out and tell the world about what we're doing down here at our little brewery in Tampa. So it's kind of morphed into a little bit of marketing, a little bit of sales, a little bit of brand management. So a little bit of everything. But to go from a bartender 10 years ago to now I'm an advanced Cicerone, certified BJCP beer judge. I get paid to talk about beer for a living. So it could be much worse. Yeah, absolutely.
So we're new to this beer club thing, and my daughter Tara failed miserably on this first one because we have to drive to Helena to get the beer tomorrow. So we're not drinking your beer. We would normally be, but sorry, we're drinking some beer from Seattle instead.
I'll get over it, Mark. It's all right.
Anyway, so we want to talk a little bit about Cigar City, where the name came from. I know a little bit about the history of that, but if you can go into that, that'd be awesome.
Sure. Well, our brewery, we were founded back in 2007 by Joey Redner. Joey's a fifth generation Floridian. He's lived his whole life in Tampa, and he was looking at the Tampa Bay area back in 2007. So it's a metro area of about 3.2 million people. And at the time, we had 6 craft breweries. And you compare that with places like Southern California, Colorado, and even Montana had a good number of breweries back in 2007. And we were really underrepresented for a major metropolitan area. So Joey basically saw a wide open playing field. He wanted to, make his mark with craft beer in the Tampa Bay area. Not only is he a big beer geek, he's a big history buff. So he wanted to tie Tampa history and Tampa culture into his brewery as much as he could. So the name Cigar City, it's a reference to the cigar manufacturing that was taking place. Late 1800s, early 1900s, there were dozens and dozens of cigar manufacturers in an area of Tampa called Ybor City. That's about 5 miles over that way. Back then, Tampa was the biggest purchaser of Cuban-made tobacco in the world. There were thousands and thousands of people hand-rolling cigars. It was an important, very important part of the economy and the culture down here in Tampa. So again, it was the biggest purchaser of Cuban-made tobacco in the world before the Cuban Revolution in the 50s. So you can't talk about Tampa culture and Tampa history without talking about cigars. But we still get that question all the time. I'm not calling out any certain states or anything, but places like Alabama, they go, so you still brew cigars there? Well, we don't brew cigars. That's not how that's just have a beer, please.
Why are you picking on Alabama these days?
It's first state.
Yeah,
first state that came to mind. I love Alabama. Nothing against those guys, but it's a question we still get that people assume we either manufacture cigars or something like that, but no, we just stick to making beer here. But again, everything we do here is tied into the culture and history of Tampa, Florida.
it seems interesting that your beer is 2,500 miles away in a mountain region when it's 73 degrees here, and so you must have grown to be a semi-large brewery at this point.
Absolutely. To go from, even though we were founded in 2007, we didn't brew our first batch of beer until January 30th, 2009. And it was brewed on the brew house that's about 10 feet over that way, which we still brew on to this day, which is pretty neat. But it was brewed by Joey Redner, our founder and our CEO, and Wayne Wombles, who's still our brewmaster. So to go from those two guys making beer in an un-air-conditioned warehouse on a little side street in Tampa, Florida. We're now the second largest craft brewery in the state of Florida. We're distributed in 48 states right now. High Life IPA, which is our big seller, is one of the best-selling IPAs nationally right now. So to have gone from just two guys sweating their asses off here in Tampa to a nationally and internationally recognized brand right now, we've been incredibly fortunate, and we're really proud of the beer that we make down here in Tampa.
Yeah. I think we probably should just get into the beers. We have 6 that we're going to do. I think that they get 3 of each or 4, 2 of each. They get for the wine or the beer club. So I'm such a wino, I can't even say beer. Anyway, so we'll just kind of go in order that I have, or you can switch it up. I don't care. But, maybe we want to talk about the Maduro Brown Ale first.
That's a great place to start. It's the very first beer we ever brewed back in January 30th, 2009. It's a Northern English brown ale, 5.5%. It's brewed with a little bit of oatmeal, gives it some creaminess, gives it some body. For a 5.5% beer, it's got so much chocolate quality, so much body. I always think of it more as a 5% easy drink, or 5.5% easy drinking stout rather than a brown ale, because it does have so much more body and so much more chocolate quality than you expect out of a typical American brown, but very flavorful, very balanced, very easy drinking.
I've been a cigar smoker a little bit in my life, so I looked at Maduro before I talked to you, and it means white in Spanish.
Right, so it's the name of a wrapper on a cigar, so a cigar reference is in turn a Cigar City reference, so that's sort of the tie into Tampa history and Tampa culture down here.
Cool. The second one is the Margarita Gose.
Sure, so a German-style sour ale, light, tart, refreshing. A Goza, it's a pretty traditional wheat beer style.
You make me look bad. Goza. All right, fine, it's Goza.
As long as you're drinking it, Mark, I don't care how you pronounce it. That's. But German-style sour ale, brewed with just a little pinch of salt, so that Goza style always has just a little salinity to it. We added some orange and some lime on top of it, so it is as advertised. It tastes like a dang margarita, but 4.2%, light, tart, refreshing, especially with all the warm weather we have down here in Tampa. This is kind of my go-to beer in warm weather. Light, easy drinking, and that little bit of sour flavor really kind of quenches the thirst. Really tasty.
Nice. The next one would be Fancy Papers IPA.
That's actually what I'm drinking right now. This is a relatively new edition. This is actually, we originally released it early in 2020 as a seasonal beer, and it took off in a way none of us expected, and the demand was there, so we said, all right, let's turn this into a year-round brand. But it is at 6.5% hazy IPA, so we're using some El Dorado hops. We're using some hops that really throw off that more passion fruit, bright citrus quality, a little less of that kind of resinous, piney quality that you expect out of a typical American IPA. And it's not, you know, opaque like you'd expect out of certain hazy IPAs, but it does have that nice haze to it. But, you know, when you think hazy IPA, you think juicy, you think fruity, and then the bitterness takes a big back seat. Not as much of that caramel body as well. So light on the palate, very fruit forward, very balanced, easy drinking.
You want to talk a little bit about the IBU and all that kind of craziness in the IPA world? What do you guys think about all that?
So IBU, you know, it helps sort of give you an idea of what you're going to be getting into with the beer. But IBU, it's a sort of subjective or relative measurement, but it stands for International Bittering Units. Essentially, it is how much alpha acid has been isomerized into that beer. So roughly, it's how bitter a beer is. At the same time, though, a 35 IBU beer, something like a Sierra Nevada Pale Ale, which is like the classic American Pale Ale, 35 IBUs, it has a pretty decent bitterness. But something like this, if you were to put 35 IBUs into a beer like this that has a little more body to it, you know, the bitterness isn't going to show up the same way. So a 55 IBU stout tastes much, much less bitter than a 55 IBU pale ale or IPA. So it certainly helps give you an idea of what you're getting into as far as bitterness, but I wouldn't say it's sort of a hard, fast rule that 55 or 25 IBUs always tastes like this. But it is a measurement that's going to help you kind of, again, know what you're getting into with these beers.
I'm not even going to try that next name. It's the one that has a sport with a ball in it.
That's it, the Highlight IPA. We get all kinds of pronunciations. We get JLA, Jayalai, Jolly Ollie. That one's my favorite. But, you know, just like I was saying earlier, Mark, as long as you're drinking it, I don't care how you're pronouncing it. But the name there, like you were saying, it's a sport. Saying for people over the age of 40, I usually say it's the thing in the beginning of Miami Vice. You remember that? For people under the age of 40, I say it was in an episode of Jackass, and people usually kind of go, oh, yeah. So, you know, we're bridging cultural gaps here. It's what it's all about. But it's a game that Florida is one of the few places in the world where they still play highlight. Essentially, it's like a racquetball with a big wicker scoop on the end of your arm. So that's the kind of Florida tie in there. But the beer itself, 7.5% American IPA. So this is the second beer we ever brewed, and it took off in a way nobody was expecting. When we originally brewed that beer, again, we're talking 2009. So back then, when people thought IPA, they thought bitterness. You know, you mentioned IBUs earlier, Mark. People wanted as high IBUs as they could get back then. You know, 100, 120 IBU beer. That's what people wanted. They wanted it to hurt when you drank it. It was this bitter, resinous sort of style of beer. And Wayne, who's our brewmaster, said, you know what, I want a IPA that's more fruit forward, something that's a little bit more balanced and that isn't going to be beating you over the head with the bitterness. So he came out with Highlight IPA. So it was really one of the first beers to come out that was much, much more hop aroma and hop flavor forward, where the bitterness really was there for balance rather than sort of the star of the show for the IPA. So it's our best selling beer. It's over 60% of our production. But it's an IPA, I would say it's an IPA for people that say they don't like IPAs, where again, the bitterness takes a back seat, 6 different hop varieties. It's dry hopped with Simcoe, which is going to throw off this really nice tangerine, clementine, orange quality. But balance is the name of the game with Highlight IPA. 7.5%, 65 IBUs, incredibly flavorful, fruit forward American IPA.
Nice. Yeah, another one, you know, Guayabera. How about that? Let's try that. Guayabera IPA?
Yeah, you got it. Guayabera.
Pale Ale, I'm sorry.
Yeah, so that's another one with sort of a, that fancy paper's catching up with me. So that's another one that's got sort of a very specific South Florida sort of Latin culture influence. Obviously, Florida has a big Latin influence. And if you picture a guy in Cuba with a straw hat smoking a big cigar, he's probably wearing a Guayabera. It's a light linen shirt. It's got 2 pockets up here in the chest, 2 pockets sort of down by the belly, and then pleats down the side. So it's a shirt that's supposed to be light, you know, sort of beach wear essentially, but it's also formal. It's also something you could wear to a wedding. But very big in Latin cultures. So that's sort of where the influence for the name came from. but it's a Citra Pale Ale. 5.5% all Citra hops. When I think Citra, I think berry, lime leaf. Same thing with High Life, where the bitterness takes a back seat and it's more about the hop flavor and hop aroma. Same thing with the Guayabera. Citra is one of those hops that the beer geeks that I'm sure your beer club folks are familiar with Citra hops. Citra is just, it's an incredibly flavorful hop where berry, lime leaf, a little bit more herbaceous quality than a High Life IPA, but 5.5%, very easy drinking.
I think our last one is, I think I can say this one. Tolabaga. Yeah, I think I did good there. Tolabaga.
Absolutely.
I heard he's an Indian chief down there, right?
Yeah, Tocobaga. It's the original native tribe that was down here before European settlers in the Tampa Bay area. It's Tocobaga. It's a red IPA, much more caramel forward, where you do get that kind of heavy malt backbone. It is dry hopped with Citra as well, so that berry quality that we were just talking about with Guayabera, you're going to get a little bit of that. And this one's got a little bit higher IBUs. It's 75 IBUs, a little higher alcohol content than a High Life IPA as well. So it's a red IPA, and when you think that, you're going to think more caramel, more body behind that beer rather than a High Life IPA. But still very much balanced, has that nice citrus quality, and then that heavy caramel quality that comes from the crystal malt that we're using. C60, some 120 that's in there as well. So really easy drinking, and it's for folks that like a little bit more sweetness, a little more body to their IPAs.
I think that's the end of the beers. I have a couple of other questions, but do you have any other comments you want to tell us, Neil? Like generally when we do these, we recommend people go to the tasting room. That's going to be a little bit hard, 2,500 miles away for most of us.
It is a little tough, but at the same time, we're lucky enough to be in an area in Florida where we get a ton of tourists. The world being in the situation it is now, it's slowed down a little bit as far as the tourism. But, if we were in Sheboygan, Wisconsin, we wouldn't have the number of people coming through the tap room like we do right now. It's Thursday afternoon, and the place is busy, the place is packed. So please, if anybody who's in the beer club does end up coming down to Florida for vacation, or I'm a big baseball geek, so in the spring, I always get excited about spring training. A lot of people come into town to see any kind of spring training games or spring break. So we do get a lot of tourists down here. So if anybody in the Montana area does end up down here, please come by the tap room. We're right by the airport in Tampa, Florida. We've got a ton of beer that doesn't leave the tap room, a ton of beer behind me in the cooler that never sees distribution. So we've always got something new on draft. We're always working on new recipes. And if there's a style of beer out there, we've brewed at least 5 different versions of it. So whatever you're looking for, we've got it for you here in the tap room.
When I interview winemakers and wine reps, my favorite question at the end is, what's your favorite beer? So I'm going to do back at you. Do you ever drink wine? And if so, what's your favorite wine?
I drink wine all the time. I love beer, but it's spice of life, right? It's all about variety. I've been drinking a lot of natural wine lately, a lot of stuff from France that's, using native yeast and throwing up some weird different fermentation profiles. So I'd say anything that's white from France and, natural, that's using whatever yeast is growing up on the wine grapes. That's what I've been drinking lately. I like the weird stuff. Yeah,
that's cool. That's what we tend to go white and rosé a lot too.
I love it.
When I first started in the wine world, it was more about the red. And I think that's probably true in the beer world. Maybe you start at a Bud Light and you end up at some obscure IPA or something.
Mark, I find it goes, it's a cyclical sort of thing. You start at Bud Light, and then you get into the IPAs, and then the Imperial Stouts, and then most of the people that work here at the brewery that have been working here for 10 years, they want to drink a lager at the end of the day. They just want beer-flavored beer. And we do a couple of those right now, which is, it's a beautiful thing. There's a time and a place for the big, flavorful, intense stouts, and then there's a time where you just want a beer that tastes like a dang beer, right?
There's a Missoula brewery up here called Kettle House, and they just did a Fish On, it's called. And that's what he said when we had him on our Zoom. He's like, sometimes you just want to grab a 4-pack or whatever, 6-pack, and get on the river and do some fishing, and you don't want to think about it. You don't want to get drunk by the end of it. So they're making a low calorie, flavorful beer. Or not as flavorful, but sometimes, and that's the same in the wine world. Sometimes you just want a damn wine. You don't want to think about it. It's
Exactly. Yeah, something sometimes you don't want anything oak aged and bright and heavy, and you just want something to get the job done, right?
Yeah. So we took a vote. There's 4 of us that voted, and we think you should take a summer trip and get out of that Florida heat next summer and come up and do a road trip in Montana. We'll take you on the river and we'll get you in all kinds of places. So you should do a market visit next summer to Montana. Have you been?
It's been in a past life I was in Montana. It's been quite a while, but you know, we've only been in the market for a little under a year at this point now. So we're excited to get up there. Yeah, don't threaten me with a good time. I'll be knocking on your door before you know it.
So I think maybe just one last question. Are you a Tom Brady fan?
You know, I grew up in New York. I'll always have a chip on my shoulder about Tom Brady, but right now the Bucks need all the help that they can get. So if Brady and Gronk are going to help the Bucks win, then more power to them. You know.
Well, I've been a lifelong Laker fan, and I hated LeBron, and now all of a sudden I have to like LeBron. Eventually, you learn to do it.
Exactly right.
Well, Neil, it's been really fun. Thank you very much.
Likewise,
we're going to do a drawing at Cheers.
Cheers.
Salute.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you. And then the brewery, Cigar City was kind enough to give us some swag. And so Tara did all the new wine club members. And we're going to pick one out for this swag winner. And it is, she probably wrote it too small for me to read. Cody Santarelli. You should probably name a beer after him because I can't pronounce this either.
Yeah, exactly. That would fit.
Cody Santarelli is so we'll have that up at Vintage Cellars. I think they're just sending it now, so it'll probably be 10 days or something, but we'll have that. Anyway, thanks you guys, and Neil, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure, and hope you do make it to Montana.
Very soon, absolutely. Cheers. Thank you guys.
Thank you.